Good evening, Dr. Michael Fisher, fearologist, feariatrist, fear analyst, and fear educator. I say all those words not just to be fun or show off or anything like that. I take them all very seriously, and they've developed over many decades. So it's not something kind of frivolous, identify label that I need to identify myself and be legitimate. But yes, those are all real issues of how to become legitimate in terms of sharing what one knows in terms of fear, research, study, discipline, and then applications into preferably a really good cause. In a nutshell, what my work is about is to release us, and I mean virtually everybody, on our confusion about nature and role of fear. And the confusion, here's really to me the key phrase. I'm not so concerned, right, about the natural fears that help us defend ourselves in the world. I'm really interested in, for not just curious reasons, but because of the pivotal importance of its damaging effects when fear becomes part of a confusion pattern by fear-ridden, fear-based individuals and or collectives of people's institutions, policies derived from that fear-ridden condition that produce an ongoing cascading confusion about the nature of reality, and fundamentally even more important in a way is the confusion about how to relate to others, particularly in what's maybe a good way. Well, other people, all kinds of people, diverse peoples, based on their backgrounds, based on many autobiographical aspects to their life, will have differences in appreciating and or understanding what is that better, that good use, relationship to, ways of purveying fear into the world. Those are my interests. So in tonight's very short video, getting kind of down to a big public display that is going on now in America with the January 6th post-presidential election resurrection that almost became an insurrection, if you haven't heard on the news, or maybe you have, in the United States of America. A historical event just within the last 2 days or so. Some of these oath keepers, parts of the members of this system of insurrection that took place on January 6th were found guilty of treacherous, dangerous insurrection and given, a very powerful long sentence in prison. But of course, this is not the end of the problem. There is no solution here in those kinds of legal processes. Okay, symbolic, they might be important. For others, they are going to stir up, on the other side, more fervor, because now they have, someone who's taken the hit for them in their movement and will become a sort of kind of messiah, guru, and leader to inspire those on the outside of prison to continue the work and make it worthwhile. We know all that rhetoric. I mean, the quote, mainstream population uses that too in military heroship, where we become heroes when we are martyrs of some kind or another. So all of those dynamics is not what this video is about. This very short video, I'm trying to make the point, and I'll say it once, then I'll share a short quote now from a book that's very instigating in, hopefully really hits on the nutshell, the head of this fear problem that I often speak about. and this person has spoken about. So get to them, and then we can come back to realize in the end to reevaluate the problem. This is my thing tonight. I'm ranting on the problem of how we discourse, how we talk about, how we entertain ourselves, how media sucks up and just loves this stuff on insurrection, the new legal trial. Will they be found guilty or not guilty? And what are the consequences? And all the pundits coming in and all the leaders and all the politics of it. Everybody trying to grab a hold, right? Everybody trying to understand how they can use the situation to move their politics, their views, their powers forward to be right. So let me maybe turn back now and unwind a little and read in a more gentle voice, a more cutting voice, and more potential learning atmosphere and framing for what is missing in all this discourse that I just talked about on these oath keepers that got nailed. A few others got nailed with legal hits. All of that, in many ways, beside the point. Yeah, so I'm trying to get to the point. I want this video shared to everybody to get the point. Not that I'm the only one who has the point. That's the point. I don't have the point. I've got a point. And I think it's an really important pointing. So this little short one-pager really hits home on the fear of problem and the problem of what really needed to be talked about in this whole January 6th, post-January 6th unfolding. It's gone on for, a good year plus to come to people trying to make sense of it, right? Meaning sensible and serve justice and all those great words that we throw around. But here's justice from an educational point of view, from a fear educational point of view. Panera Overstreet is an adult educator. I will not go into her bio here, but she wrote a book called The Understanding of Fear in Ourselves and Others, 1951, penned, American. Fabulous book, way ahead of her time, way ahead of its time. I've referred to it and referenced it many times in my scholarship. Chapter 7, my favorite of all her work in that book, Dangerous Disguises. Let me read one page, her opening. As we noted earlier, one reason why we have not made a more realistic attack upon fear, this fear problem, is that we have often failed to recognize it for what it is. We have responded to its disguises, not to that which is disguised. One unfortunate result of this is that we have overlooked many among us who have needed help with fear problems. Ooh, that's a good line. I'll repeat. One unfortunate result of this disguises problem, is that we have overlooked many among us who have needed help with fear problems. These people ought to be blamed, my addition, have seemed to the indifferent eye to be doing all right, to be adequate enough, to be getting about as much out of life as most, even in some cases, to be markedly successful. We have seen no reason to bother about them. Some, to be sure, we have ranted as minor or major nuisances. For example, weaklings, spongers, eccentrics, and egocentrics, or pompous bores. But we have seen no reason to bother about them either. It has been less irritating to pass by, on the other side to avoid them. A second unfortunate result is that we have often failed, even when dealing with those we care intimately about, to recognize those early symptoms of fear that might enable us, if we had an eye, a critical eye, to them, to take preventive and remedial measures at a stage where such measures still lie well within our competence. Last paragraph. It becomes, therefore, a matter of utmost practicality for us to know fear when we see it. For us to learn to penetrate at least its most common disguises. We need not bother about every disguise. There are many, some significant, not so significant. There is room, as she says, for many of them within the general queerness of life. That's it. Now, to her key point. Certain disguises, however, are of a destructive importance. Chief among them, fear disguised as strength, fear disguised as goodness, fear disguised as love. Strength, goodness, love. When are they true? When are they fear disguises? These are all dangerous, these disguises, because they are all exploitive. They all involve an effort on the part of the fear-ridden person, fear neurotic, if you will, fear-based is another way to say it, to use other people as a means to their own ends. They are all dangerous, moreover, because they confuse us, double underline. They confuse us about the human qualities we most need to develop and trust. Yeah, do we need to learn how to trust strength in ourselves and others, especially when we're so dependent on them throughout most of our growing up and early years? The goodness that we expect and need to learn to trust in those dependent years that shape our entire personality for life for the most part, and trust that love that we definitely need as humans, as mammals, that care. Fear disguises itself in those qualities under many conditions, which she goes into this long chapter showing how those disguises are actually have an anatomy and architecture and their significance. So when we are dealing with the nuisances, as she uses that term, let's just say those involved in the insurrection, call them all the labels that we're throwing at them. Not just political, but a cultural interest, a psychological interest, and a spiritual interest as far as I'm concerned. What is going on in those movements that led to that insurrection, that led to that legal way that we tried to handle and bring justice to them, without talking about the fear and its disguises that get and hurt us in the core of our trust for strength in others, for goodness in others, and for love in others. That confusion. Now apply that to the entire situation of those involved in those insurrections, what their backgrounds are, how fear has been a confusion for them, a disguise, of how they come to understand what is good, what is strong, what is love, what do they care for. Oh yeah, they care for something. They'll die for it. All rebels do. That's not the problem. And then it's us, so-called on the other side of these radicals, so-called. How do we understand, right? That's how she opens the chapter. It's unfortunate we don't recognize the disguises of fear where it counts, which is in this social trust, this relational trust, foundational to any sanity and connection to reality and the relatedness and all those important virtues, qualities that make for healthy human function. That's it. So her first page ends. Our personal and common salvation may well depend upon the wide growth among us of strength, goodness, and love. But we will not be saved either by honoring their imitations or by displacing to the genuine our dislike of the imitation. Period. We confuse the imitation of those qualities carrying those nuisances in our world, the lawbreakers, the transgressors, the rebels, etc., the revolutionaries, if they call themselves that as well. And that's what I think's happened. We've confused the entire story of January 6th, confused by the imitations. And we've not been able to see underneath critically, reflectively, discernibly. The fear problem. So there's no one to blame on either side is worse or better at some level, at this level of analysis of the fear problem. Whole mess has still been neglected to be spoken about. So that's why I'm doing this video. Thanks for listening, and let's have a conversation about this. Let's get this out there so that we can start to discern more carefully what actually are going to be useful interventions in the future.